Good evening, everybody. Dear participants from the conference hall and by distance, we start with the fourth session entitled Landraces of the World. And the first presenter we call Mark Leiter from European Robust Organic Fruit Breeders Network, Euro-Organic Fruits, Nova Fruits, Belgium, to present his work entitled Integration of Local Fruit Land Races and Genetic Resources in the Concept of Euro-Organic Fruits, a European Charter under development on organic participatory breeding network in fruit species. Dr. Mark Leiter?
Yes.
You are welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of all the co-authors of my presentation, I really appreciated the invitation to be there with you and with a very interesting program. I would like to share my screen, if possible.
Yes, you can share.
Okay, that's good.
Yes, yes.
Do you see it?
Of course.
Okay, very nice. So
everything is nice, okay.
I will start my presentation. So the title is the integration of local fruit land races and genetic resources in the concept of Euro-Organic fruits. It is a under development charter that we developed in the framework of the Life Seed European project. There are a lot of co-authors of my presentation, and I thank you them very much. Sorry. So as breeder, key element in the long term is really the long-term evaluation process of our local fruit tree genetic resources. And we are very keen to develop this aspect in our institute, as since 40 years ago, we developed evaluation just without any spray, so no fungicide, no insecticide, and no fertilizing. So it's really more than organic way to evaluate our local genetic resources that we collected throughout all the gardens and the old orchards around our different regions. And then after having done this proper evaluation of our genetic resources, then we can define different strategies for making use of our genetic resources. And that's the key element of collecting and conserving genetic resources, is to make much more use of them as such, directly, to use such old cultivars directly for different purposes. And you see here different purposes we released very tolerant cultivars for the nursery trade, for fruit growers or for amateurs, for processing, and also for developing participatory breeding. And the topic of my presentation will be focused on this aspect, participatory breeding and making use of our local genetic resources. Very important also is to have common protocols and tools at the European level for doing a proper work of evaluation of our research, of our genetic resources. And here is an example of a grant scheme project funded by ECPGR, and also very I'm happy to inform you that we released in May a new descriptor list, and also I wanted to point out the importance of the protocols and the methods how to properly evaluate our genetic resource, and all those aspects have been described in this new descriptor list for pair. And we the same document will be also very soon developed on Apple. So we will also have the same document for the Apple genetic resources. Then what do we need for organic breeding? We need really, really robust cultivars. It means robust is a capacity of adaptation to different kinds of biotic or abiotic stresses. It is a concept which is not very well defined, but if I can take an example, we don't need a Formula 1, but we need something that can go everywhere, and perhaps not so fastly as a Formula 1, but that can go everywhere under very different climatic or biotic conditions. We need also good disease tolerance instead of resistance. I mean that especially for fruit trees, a polygenic resistance is much stronger and has a better capacity of adaptation than a monogenic resistance. So therefore we are more and more developing the concept of tolerance. So that means that cultivars could be slightly susceptible, but at an acceptable level, and that will be that's a new paradigm in developing new cultivars adapted for, or better adapted to, organic farming systems. Then, for sure, it is an economic activity to grow fruit trees. So yield is important. Quality is much more important than formerly. And also, we are looking for better nitrogen efficiency of our cultivars. That's an example of a descriptor that we defined for assessing this kind of global aspect of robustness, but and that's based on the global health expressed by the fruit trees without any spray scheme. That's such tools that we will further develop in European projects. Then I would like to present an example of a transborder organic participatory breeding program between North France and Belgium, and it is very well organized between two regional institutes, and also 28 organic regional growers are members of this association, and we developed different kinds of agreements to work properly together. Then at a more European level, in the framework of Leipzig, thanks to Costas, we met several times, not physically, but by screen. That was not so good, but it was better than nothing. And together we are developing a charter called European Robust Organic Fruits Network. And it is to develop together an organic participatory breeding network on fruit species. And for sure, as many other people presented, we need to have cultivars with reducing reliance to plant protection inputs and so on, and increase resilience not only based on the cultivar robustness, but also on the agroecosystem on itself. So we need to change our paradigm. As I see here in Belgium, the organic farmers, and especially fruit growers, they don't do so much differently than the integrated production farmers. So biodiversity is not so much developed, and so we need to improve also those aspects that the agro-ecosystem of organic farming, fruit growing is much more developed. Then the Organic Fruit Charter aims to strengthening this organic EU network among participatory breeders. That there are some in some countries, for example, Apfelgut in North Germany is well organized and is well developing cultivars. There are some case studies in Europe, sharing common objective of bringing more robust cultivars to European fruit growers. And the charter is open for all kinds of cultivars, amateur gardeners, cultivars for orchard meadows, or for processing, or for desert professional cultivars. So it's very, very open. And the basic spirit of the founders is, for sure, together we are stronger. But we define that the spirit will be based on the pleasure. Really, the pleasure is the key element of what we defined. Why are we together? It is to work, this pleasure to work together, to be together, to share inspirations, material, and to share our activity and happiness to work in this field. Then we could develop together common process, sharing material, parents, pre-breeding material, but also the idea is to give to the consumers also a better happiness to taste larger diversity of fruits, and not only the same as Pink Lady from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, but having a large diversity of taste and use larger than what we have for the moment. And also the idea is to build up a network on testing trials for the already available material, but also new material that could come from our work together. And also creating a new approach for local bred cultivars for more local market, and not having always the idea that all cultivars need to be put on the European market. It is not necessary every time. Then the basic shared principle is really to make much better use of our local land races and genetic resources, and that will have as consequence to broadening our genetic base of the cultivars. As you know, especially for apple, 5 commercial cultivars are responsible for 50% of the European production, and many of those cultivars are linked together by one or other funders. So the genetic base of the commercially cultivated apple is very, very narrow, and too narrow probably. Then we need, as I developed above, to properly evaluate our cultivars for pest and disease tolerance, robustness, and so on, and to use such material, original material, in pre-breeding work and then in breeding programs. And the second principle is to develop at least at one or other step of the process, of the breeding process, the participatory approach. And that can be done or at defining the breeding goals, or at the level of the choice of parents, of choice of selection environment, of also to co-select elite variety collectively. And then further on, we got a good news from what we submitted with a large consortium of 21 partners, a proposal to the European call, Horizon Europe, on the topic fostering organic crop breeding. And the title of the project is Innovative Organic Food Breeding and Use, so InnoBreed. And it has been selected to be funded by EU, and we will start probably by the end of the year. We need that all agreements need to be signed and so on. But that's a really good news, because we will further develop the organic food network that we started inside the Live Seed project. And so the scope of InnoBreed is large. All fruit rosaceae species, so apple, pear, cherry, apricot, but also citrus and grapes. And we propose to mobilize innovation solutions, so social innovation, new idea type, new methods for screening, because robustness is something quite new, so we need new tools and new methods to select the best robust cultivars and or the genitors. And that will be done on a participative and multi-actor and multi-tray base. And we want also to develop the use of more underutilized fruit tree genetic resources and pre-breeding and advanced material. So the organization of the project is also, as you see, in the central part, it is the case studies. So we will study different already ongoing case studies, and from those case studies, practical case studies, we will learn a lot of things. And then what we learned from these cases will be shared and tested further in the different work packages. I will not explain the different work packages because it is not the place to do it, but then you see how we built our concept of project based on networks of case studies and based on participatory approach at different level of the project. So we will be for sure connected with running initiatives and programs in the organic farming systems community. So we will identify and make definition of the current lock-in in the development of organic food farming system, developing new idea type, as I developed to identify and use robust cultivars, also to be better adapted to climate change. Also nutriment value could also play an important role. And then afterwards, we will have a process of validation and implementation of what we observed in different places and by different partners. And then we will develop participative and classical breeding and involving different actors like scientists, stakeholders, but for sure also food chain actors or stakeholders, and the base is to involve the farmers, so the fruit growers. Having done that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very open for any questions or remark. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Laterre, for this quite interesting presentation, indicating the action and the results of a successful organic farming network among breeders, researchers, and farmers. We go on.
We will go on, and we will gather all the questions at the end. Don't forget that you can send your questions to Slido as well. And now I would like to ask Vanya Azevedo from the International Potato Center to share with us her long experience and her presentation about the role of gene banks in conserving landraces genetic diversity. Vanya, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Nice to see you.
Good.
We can hear you.
Good to see you too. Thank you so much for the invitation. Can you hear me?
Very well. Thank you for the acceptance of our invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you
So
share your screen? Okay.
Yes, can you see it well?
Ακόμα όχι, ακόμα. Περιμένω.
Is it visible?
Not yet.
Yes,
now
now.
everything, it's okay.
I think it is. I can see it in the. All right. Thank you so much. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how the gene banks can support the conservation of the land races and complement the important role of conserving this important diversity for the long term. So basically, when we discuss the evolution of the crops, since the start, we consider that we have the wild ancestors with a very high level of diversity. And as human beings, we started domesticating these crops, the species that we use today as food mainly, but not only. And with the domestication, we started selecting materials, specific diversity that are more usable, that are more palatable, that we are more interested in, that will produce more, that will have more yield. So with the selection that we have been doing compared to the wild ancestors, we caused a significant bottleneck in the diversity of these crops. And this is being done much before science becomes something official in agriculture and developing the commercial varieties, right? Farmers have been doing that for many, many, many years. And farmers constantly exchange material among themselves. They constantly identify new sources of diversity. The materials in the fields are constantly crossing and generating new sources of diversity. So when we talk about these new domesticated species, which are the land races that we are talking about here, they are constantly evolving, creating new diversity. And while we do some selections, of course, we reduce the diversity again. But it's where everything is happening in terms of agricultural diversity or agrobiodiversity. And when a new crop is introduced in another place, it's sent to another country or to another community, and it's a new source of diversity that is arriving somewhere else, this is when we call the dispersal bottleneck. So it means that a very small source of diversity was used to start a new population, a new agricultural system somewhere else where that crop was not there before. With this dispersal bottleneck, we can cause a reduction in the diversity again. But as I said, farmers are constantly exchanging material, multiplying and planting different diversity together, different land races. They promote crossings, and the diversity is always increasing. So in terms of genetic diversity of cultivated crops, we will for sure find a lot of diversity among the land races. This is where we expect to find the biggest diversity as possible. And when the science came and the modernization started in the agricultural system, with the formalization of the seed systems where we need to follow certain rules to register varieties that might be extremely stable, we cause the final genetic erosion, meaning that these varieties that are commercial, they are not evolving anymore. They need to be standardized. They are meant for a specific kind of production that is not the one that the local and traditional farmers used to do. And when we do that, and when we do not care about the other diversity, where the entire diversity still is, coming from the wild ancestors, the wild relatives, and the land races, and we focus exclusively in the commercial varieties, and don't care about conserving the diversity, we will be losing a significant source of diversity for new demands. Right, so when the Green Revolution happened, we were completely focused in yield because we had to feed people. Now we understand that more than yield, nutrition is important, resistance to diseases, adaptation to climate change. So there is a lot of diversity that we need to develop new varieties that are not available in the current varieties that were released commercially. So this is the entire story, very shortly, of course, of the evolution of the crops that we use. Mainly focused in food, of course. So when the gene banks come, we look for conservation and we look for conserving the maximum diversity as possible of the cultivated crops to allow a viability of new sources of diversity for us to be able to answer to the new demands. So in this map, we can see the biggest gene banks in the world, the ones that have more than 10,000 accessions. There are many more than these ones. And we can show that they are widely distributed all over the world, meaning that most of the countries understand the importance of conserving the genetic diversity and are capable of doing it, because there is also a significant cost associated to that. And the gene banks will conserve the plants depending on the characteristics of the plants. So some of them, mainly the grains, we can conserve the seeds, but some fruit, some clonal crops, we need to use different kind of methodologies, what can make it a bit more costly. And the yellow bars are the international gene banks, and I work for one of them, for CIP in Peru. And the CGIR has 11 international gene banks focused in more than 25 different crops with the objective to help end hunger and develop agriculture in developing countries. So these 11 gene banks focus in these more than 25 different food crops. We are constantly looking for new diversity and gap areas where we never collected before to guarantee that we will maintain a significant source of diversity for the development of new varieties. And because of that, of course, we work very closely with the farmers who are conserving the land races. So we are totally focused, and our work is completely related to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically the SDG 2, Target 2.5, that talks clearly about the importance of conserving plants, but not only plants, plants and animals in gene banks, nationally and internationally, the ex situ conservation that we call. And these are, very briefly, the accessions, the crops that the CGIR is conserving, and the number of materials. So we currently conserve more than 750,000 different accessions of around 25 crops. And then, as I said, we are, of course, focused in intra and inter-specific diversity. So this photo is a representation of the varieties of potatoes that are cultivated in Peru. So this photo is from our gene bank, the one with the potatoes well organized in line, this one here. And there are at least, you can easily find 20 different varieties of potatoes that come from the traditional farmers, and these are all land races. And it's a huge diversity, potato with very high levels of antioxidants and vitamin A, and many other attributes that we usually don't find in the commercial variety, which is this yellow one on the bottom that we can find everywhere. So what do we mean about the integrated conservation, right? I'm talking about ex situ conservation that we do with the gene banks, but also the importance of what the farmers do. So they are two complementary ways of doing conservation, and one does not substitute the other. It doesn't mean that if I have a gene bank, I don't need to care about in situ, and that if I have the in situ, I don't need to care about ex situ, because the objectives are a bit different. They complement each other, and the way that we do the work also is different. So when we talk about the farmers, dealing with their land races in their fields, we are not just talking about sowing and harvesting and eating. There is much more associated to a crop when we talk about traditional communities. So there are things related to their culture, and so the crops, many times they link to specific festivals, to dancing, to astrology, and there are many things going on there that is supporting the development and the evolution of these crops in the field, like the pest management and many other things. So biosystematics, traits, the use system, learning, and rituals, culture, land use, there are many things involved in the in situ conservation of these crops. While the ex situ is the scientific work that we do, where we collect, we characterize, we conserve, we identify the traits, and we continue supporting the farmers. So it is a system. The farmers are very well doing their work in the field and need support, of course. And the gene banks come as a complementary tool where we interact with the farmers to identify new sources of diversity and support them. So we do backup their materials, we monitor, we repatriate. There must be a reciprocity and a relationship of trust that we are there to support each other. While the farmers in the fields will be using this for, as I said, for many different uses. So this is a two-way thing. So we do receive material from them and they do receive material from us, because it is our job and our responsibility to guarantee that any time that the farmer who donated their material to us, if they lose it for some reason, that we repatriate and give it back to them. Here I bring one example of a very nice collaboration that we have with farmers in Peru. This project we concluded last year, and we analyzed more than 1,000 accessions from different communities in these two regions of Peru, from Pasco and from Sierra de Lima. And so they gave to us 1,079 different land races, and we did a phenotypic characterization and also a molecular characterization. And it was very interesting that they gave 2 or 3 tubers per variety. And we identified that a few of them were actually more than one variety. So some of their materials that they were considering as only one variety, they were phenotypically and molecularly different. And some varieties that different communities considered as, well, they had their own name, they had their own way of managing, they were molecularly and phenotypically similar. But this was very interesting because it allowed us to compare with the more than 4,000 accessions of potato that we already have in the SIP gene bank. And more than 3,000 of them are land races that were collected in the past, sometimes more than 30 years ago. And we identify, we could cover a significant diversity, considering the different ploidies of the different groups of potatoes. And with the complete molecular analysis, we could compare the different land races from the different communities with the SIP gene bank and understand what are the materials that they prefer and how they are distributed and how they correlate. And with this analysis, we identified 88 accession varieties among the more than 1,000 that we analyzed that were not represented in the SIP gene bank. They were completely unique materials that were not being conserved anywhere else except in the farmer community. And this photo is of the ceremony of the ending of the project, where they symbolically donated the 88 accessions for SIP to conserve in the gene bank, and also to make this material available for research for scientists all over the world. So the work that SIP does is under the International Treaty for Plant and Agriculture, and genetic resources for food and agriculture, I'm sorry. And we received the material, this new 88 accessions from them. And we were able to connect and to build this very strong relationship with the farmers. And it's long, as you can see here, we have more than 20 years of history of collaborating with farmers. And just to give a few numbers, in the past few years, we answered to requests to more than 39 communities in Peru, and another 5 farmer associations that represent multiple different families and farmers. And we repatriated more than 3,400 different land races to them, representing more than 25,000 tubers that we multiplied, we identified, and we gave back to them because or they had a high level contamination of viruses, or because they might have lost it for different reasons. And so connection, as I said, is a two-way collaboration. We support that. We are constantly trying to identify where there might be different sources of diversity that are not represented. In this first image here, we see the distribution of the potato cultivars. So where the land races are being cultivated in this region, not only in Peru, but a little bit in Bolivia as well. And this is the result of a gap analysis study that we did for many different crops. So this represents in yellow up to red, where there might be land races that were never collected for 25 different crops. And then when we see this region and compare with this previous map here, we see that there are significant gaps for potato in this region of South America. And so it highlights the importance of the continued collaboration and work with the farmers, because there are many things that they are cultivating there that might be under risk. So more than doing molecular analysis and conserving things in the gene bank, we help them identify and develop catalogs about their potatoes, their variability, and these materials are commercialized by them in the Peruvian market. They have their own brand, and they sell this diversity to the entire community. And with this work, we could also identify some of the varieties that are least abundant or most abundant, meaning that some of them are still in risk because very few farmers use them, and that they are not conserved anywhere else. So we know where to focus to really provide a significant support. And we can see here, and it's very illustrative, how the modern variety reacts to places like the Andes. So the first image, the commercial variety did not resist to frost, but while the land races are very resistant, and they continue even though the differences in temperature in the region. So they are much more rustic and adapted to this environment. And here, very shortly, to show some work with different crops, and we did phenotypic and genotypic analysis of land races of sorghum, pigeon pea, and pearl millet collected all over the world in different regions of the world. And they are all land races. We carefully selected them. And we see that for some crops like pearl millet, sometimes one accession is almost an entire population, meaning that the material that the farmers are producing and are maintaining in their farms, the traditional farmers mainly, they represent a huge diversity that are not at all closely represented in the commercial varieties, showing that these materials are extremely rich to help us fight hunger and adapt our agriculture to the challenges of the future. And then we, of course, characterize the diversity within and among the accessions. We can see that within one accession, we can have a significant diversity, and among the accessions as well. And not only for molecular markers and basic traits, but also for important traits that are of our interest, like protein content. So just to give one example here for pigeon pea, we have some accessions with 20% of protein, while we have other accessions with 36% of protein. And these are land races, and these are material with high level of potential to be considered for a breeding program or for the development of new varieties with high level of protein content, considering, for example, that the plant-based diet, diet is increasing significantly among human populations. So the content of protein in our food, in our plants, is significantly important to cover the lack of protein coming from animals, because a lot of people are deciding not to eat too much meat anymore, and also for other kind of characteristics. So the variability of the traits in these land races is extremely huge. So the final message is that, well, the best strategy for a proper long-term conservation is to guarantee the integrated conservation between the two strategies, the development of a very strong connection and trust between the two different methodologies, and this is how we guarantee that the crops continue evolving in the field. This is extremely important, that they are exposed to the climate change, that they are exposed to, well, different diseases and everything that we know that is happening, lack of water or extreme heat or extreme cold. But that at the same time we support another way of conserving this material, guaranteeing that in any case we will have a copy of them in a gene bank in case they are lost for different reasons. Well, I hope I respected my time. Usually I talk a lot, but thank you very, very much for the opportunity of being here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We had the chance to learn too many things in very few minutes. Unfortunately, Dr. Gaudi and Dr. Raul Sevillano are not yet with us, so we can accept a few questions for Vanya Azevedo and Mark Latour. Please, your questions, please. Έχουμε κάτι στο slide, στο chat. Στο chat τι γράφει ακριβώς? Στο chat τι γράφει?
Ναι, δεν μπορούμε να το δούμε εμείς εδώ. Υπάρχει στο chat μια ερώτηση.
I would like to make a question till we find out what is mentioned on the chat. So, I would like to ask both of you, from your experience in the various gene banks and international gene banks or more smaller curators of field collections. What are the problems that you are facing? And also with your experience and your knowledge about the national gene banks and the problem they are almost always face with the funding and the personnel. What are the common problems that you are facing for your collections, and what the different advantages or disadvantages of the international seed banks? So, if Mark, do you want to answer first?
Okay. I'm a specific case because we are not really a gene bank. We are an agricultural research center, and we collected material as genetic resources. But the only way for us for surviving in project and so on is to let's see the value of this material and to promote the use of this material. So we have developed since many years a strategy for making for giving material to the public and to local market and to small nurseries, and giving many information on the origin and specifically to the selection of very robust cultivars that are able to be grown without any pesticides, and even better than organic. So we need very robust and strong material that could be grown either in the gardens or in orchard meadows or for processing. So that was how we manage the fact that we can survive, and also it is, I need really to mention, it is because the public is very, very, very interested in what we are doing, and the public make pressure of the politic makers. And because they are elected by the public, if the public is aware about the importance of what we are doing, we can survive and we can get some funds to continue our work. So that I have a specific place, so I'm not an international gene bank, I'm not a real gene bank, so that's my point of view. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And the same for you, the same question for you, Vanya, as well.
Yes, thank you for the question, and it's a very important question, and it's very challenging doing gene banking because of funding is absolutely one of the biggest issues that we all face. So before coming to an international gene bank to work for CIB, I worked for a national gene bank. I worked for Embrapa in Brazil for 11 years. And when I was there, I was running the Embrapa gene banks for about 6 years. So I can say that I know very well one big national system. And being in the international system allowed me also to collaborate with multiple other national systems. And well, we have a few different things that make everybody's work a little bit more difficult, although in almost all institutes that you go that do agricultural research, every visitor is taken to the gene bank. The gene bank is always the beautiful thing to show. The gene bank is always very nice for people to see. And we have all these beautiful stories, but we never have enough money to maintain the gene banks, right? So this is one of the things, because if the gene bank is considered as a research program like any other and needs to compete for funds with a breeding program, with a biotechnological program, or any other kind of research, it's very difficult to convince the person who will give you the funds that I will guarantee that this material will not die in the next 5 years of the project, while the other program is promising a new variety or a new gene or something very technological, right? The impact seems much lower, although it is what will allow the other programs to have material to continue existing. So this is a very tricky thing, and lots of the people who are deciding, and the big institutes and the donors, they really don't. Well, maybe we didn't have enough arguments to convince them yet, even though it's very obvious that the gene banks are very important. So I can say that for the international gene banks, the CGIAR had been through a difficult moment in the past, where it was very difficult to get enough funds for the gene banks. And I believe it was a little bit connected with the new international legislations, right? The agreements and conventions. So after the CBD, for example, the international gene banks were a little bit restricted in distributing material to the community, because the CBD came to recognize the sovereignty of the countries over their own genetic resources. And that put the international gene banks in a limbo situation that nobody knew exactly if they could continue distributing or not. With the international treaty, where we have a multilateral system and a list of accessions of crops that the countries agree to facilitate the access for food and agriculture, and with a specific article for the international gene banks, it allowed us to continue doing our job. And it is recognized and accepted under the FAO, under the treaty, that the international gene banks do not belong to the CGIAR, but the CGIAR hosts these gene banks for the international community. And this openness allowed us to also get some more financial support. And it allows us to continue distributing. So we distribute material for more than 100 countries every year, considering all the 11 CGIAR gene banks. So our main challenge now, I would say, for the international gene banks is to be able to identify duplicates in the collections. So when the gene banks started 40, 50 years ago, there was nothing. So it started from zero. So everything that could be collected would be conserved. And the exchange of material among different gene banks happened quite often, and lots of them trusted their materials in the international gene bank. So many accessions were received from different sources, and they were cataloged as different accessions. And right now, we are working significantly in rationalizing, because we do spend a lot of money, and it makes no sense to spend a lot of money conserving the same thing 2, 3, or 4 times. So the SIP collection, for example, already did a significant work in rationalizing the potato collection, identifying duplicates. For the national gene banks, I would say again that funding is definitely one of the most challenging aspects, and real support from the institutes. And the national legislation sometimes also cause a little bit of uncertainty in the possibility of collecting new materials, going to the fields and conserving new sources of diversity of native species, of land races, of anything associated to traditional knowledge. There might be sometimes a little bit of bureaucracy to be followed. And then some gene banks, some people prefer to be extra careful. And this is making us lag a little bit behind in some regions because of the legislations and the potential bureaucracy to access this kind of accessions. But I would say that we are in a much better position after the treaty was signed, and more than 140 countries are part of the treaty, because it opened, again, the possibility of continual exchange of material of at least these 54 crops that are listed in the Annex 1. I hope I covered all the aspects of the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Vanya, for your optimistic messages that you said to everyone of us through your presentations. Please.
Okay. Fortunately, Lami Gauti from Morocco is with us. She has also a good connection with internet. So we wait her presentation entitled The Landraces in the Seed Sector in Morocco, a focus to faba bean. You can share your presentation. Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, and also we see your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like first to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to participate in the 6th scientific meeting for landraces and indigenous varieties. It is, of course, a great opportunity for us to gather around this topic that is not that much addressed, I should say, in the scientific community. Well addressed, but sometimes the actions, as we were hearing also from the comments, are not that much, consolidated to bring them into reality and to make, of course, the land races having the position and the value they have to have in our in the common sustainable agriculture. So my intervention is about the land races in the seed sector in Morocco, taking faba bean as a case. First of all, I would like to say that just to position, because you have a session that is open on the land races of the world. So Morocco, for those who don't know, the country is an African country that is exactly in the corner of Africa. And the IAV Hassan II is a higher education institute that is located in Rabat and also in Agadir within Morocco. So just a brief introduction. It's just to localize a little bit our situation. I would like to start by saying, and I'm sure that the other people and other scientists that were before me presented this also as well, but we have such an evolution, of course, during the last, from the Green Revolution, 1950, until now, we had an evolution of the world production of the staple food, which was completely and, in a very continuous way and in a positive way. But to have or to achieve, to have this achievement in production, We followed a model that was a linear model, expecting that we have first to adapt the environment to the cropping systems. And the hypothesis behind it was that we are disposing on unlimited natural resources, and we are disposing on unlimited technological advances and innovation. And now, if we have to see within this intensive agriculture we have been just settling in our model, we came after that with questions on climate and natural resources. And these questions, of course, are today challenging us to put the question, is this agricultural model viable, sustainable? And we all know that we are facing this question and trying to provide answers and to provide solutions to that. And if we want to have, and this is, I'm going just to go by, of course, the climate change, we all know what is the impact. We know also that for the natural resources, we have ecosystem services that were, dropped by about 60% if we take the international reports. And now the question is to rethink the agricultural model. It is very important. And our objective is very simple. We want to increase productivity, but we want to decrease as well vulnerability. And while doing so, because what we did with our last system was to increase productivity, but increase vulnerability of the system as well. So if we want to have these both aspects of increasing productivity and decreasing vulnerability, we need to have another key asset, which is genetic diversity. It is a crucial point where we want to go from a system where we are high producing and where we have a use of a very low genetic diversity, but having a high vulnerability, to a system where we are having a productivity but low vulnerability of the system, and the key assets here is a high genetic diversity. So, and this, of course, whether on the interspecific level or with the intraspecific level. It means we have to diversify our species, the species that are used in agriculture that are sometimes, the main species, 3 species are having 60% of our nutritional the nutritional aspect of the word is based on 3 staple foods. And this is, of course, very, very dangerous. This is a big risk. And we have also to increase our, the intraspecific level of the diversity within varieties and, of course, land races. So it is a key asset, of course, to have a resilient agricultural system. And with the genetic diversity, it is very clear. It's either you use it or you lose it. There is no other choice. So I just want to point out that for us, legumes are playing in Morocco and also in all systems as a species, a major role, because the species of legumes are, of course, having a lot of services, ecosystemic services, that are of interest and that are in favor for a resilient and a sustainable agriculture. Still, what we are observing in the North African region and also in many other countries, it is the same trend, is that the difference between the acreage between cereals and legumes is extremely high. Whereas legumes should occupy a high part in the rotations of the agricultural systems. So you can see that, for example, in Morocco, it is 5%, it is 9%, in Algeria, it is 5%, in Tunisia, it is 9%, and in North Africa, it is 8%, even if you go into France, it is 3%. So it means that we have a high discrepancy between the legumes' potentialities in a sustainable agriculture and to have a food safety and nutrition as well, and actually the actual uses in the present cropping systems. Besides, if we look at the legumes about their genetic diversity, we have Morocco is one of the center of diversity of fava bean. with complex landscapes, with the with very diversified climatic diversity. So we are a center of diversity that was, in many publications you have, and also the work that is done in Morocco, faba bean, among other legumes, are very diversified at the intraspecific level. So I want to say that the genetic diversity of faba bean in Morocco is concentrated in the northern area, in the Rif and the pre-Rif region, and it is a basic crop that is inherent to the cereal cropping system and that is cultivated since centuries. We have this in situ diversity, but we have also the ex situ diversity for the genetic resources, where we have also gene banks in Morocco, where we have as well, in INRA, we have a gene bank of STAT, where we have also the accessions of faba bean. And we have also in Morocco, the ICARDA, which is an international center that is also holding its own gene bank. And what I want to say is that 10% of the accessions of the gene bank are actually for legumes, and we have 50% of those legumes are for Medicago accessions, and Vicia species are about 14%. And of course, these organisms are providing, of course, all, with many others, they are providing these accessions to all, institutions, private or public bodies who are willing to work with this material and with this germplasm. I want here to introduce very briefly, while we are speaking about landraces and we are speaking about the seed sector, it is very important to understand what is the share of the landraces into the panorama of the cropping system. And I'm taking here the case of the legumes and in Morocco. So as you know, there is the formal sector, and the formal sector, of course, as you know, is starting by having the first component is having the gene banks, as I was mentioning just right now. And then, of course, we have the research. The gene banks, of course, these are public, so they are offering their services for the whole, community. And we have the research in Morocco that is done by public institutions. So INRA in Morocco, and also IAV Hassan II, my institution, and also universities. And we do have breeders. That is also INRA, which is the Institute of National Researches of Agronomy, of Agriculture. And this is at the national level, and we have at the international level, international breeding companies. It is very much important to understand that in Morocco, we do not have private Moroccan breeding companies. It's either the public institutions who are providing the breeding, or we have the international private companies that are selling their products in Morocco. Then the varietal registration, of course, is done by public bodies. And then we have seed production and distribution done by public bodies, but also private, national and international companies. And then we have control and certification that are done by also public bodies. So this is the formal sector. And then near to that, we have what we call the informal sector. And in the informal sector, of course, it's starting with the crop that is harvested. So the crop that is harvested, and then part of it is stored, and then a part of it is going into farm seed, and a part is going into an exchange, and then it ends as a farm seed, or consumed, or even going to the market to be sold, and then this is also constituting the farm seed. And this is the informal sector. So now we could ask ourselves, what is the part of each sector within the seed sector in general? And taking legumes as an example. And here I mean, in Morocco, for example, we have 1%, what we call this formal sector is actually just 1%, and the 99% is actually the informal sector. This is why it is very important to understand what is going on in the informal sector where no reglementation is set up. We are working a lot on all what is formal, but what is formal is actually constituting just a very small part of the landscape of the seed sector in agriculture, especially in Arab crop. Of course, these figures are going to change from a crop to another one, but still for the arable crop, you will find a great contribution of the informal sector to the seed sector. So within this, we want to understand, I mean, here I'm presenting what are the type of material that you find into the informal and the formal sector. In the informal sector, which is the 99%, you will find the land races and on-farm multiplied improved varieties, whereas in the formal sector, you will find only the improved varieties that, as I explained, are coming from the certification and the registration and coming, of course, from breeding companies and not from the multiplication that is done on farm. Now, on the evolution, of course, if we are in the informal sector, we are disposing on the genetic material and varieties that are already going into a dynamic process of evolution, whereas what we have as improved varieties that are bought each year, this is a very static. So they are very static as they have to be distinct, homogeneous, and stable. The factor of evolution here is, of course, the natural selection that is operated through the farmer's field. And of course, we can conclude that the genetic diversity is very high within the material that is used in the informal sector and very low as we are addressing the formal sector. We have a very high number of land races that are used in the informal sector, and very few varieties that are available for farmers for the formal sector. When we go into the land races, basically their principal asset is the high adaptation. And for the improved varieties, it's we have a low adaptation. But on the other hand, you may have a low productivity for the land races and also a high productivity for the improved varieties, but if the optimal conditions are afforded. So it means that if we have to compare the agricultural context where both types of varieties are used, you have in the informal sector basically unfavorable areas with crop failure risks and a traditional agriculture with low inputs. And as we understand, it's because the adaptation is very much requested in these areas because the crop failure is very high. Whereas if we are using improved varieties, it should be in favorable areas with low crop failure and where you are providing actually all the inputs that are required to make your cropping system successful. So within this, just knowing that we have such a contribution of the land races and also for the informal seeds that are exchanged, that are used in the agricultural system, we need to have action to valorize this genetic diversity and to put a frame and a context, because we have no context with that, or very few. So we have no control on what is really happening and how it is happening, and if we can orient or if we can valorize and how we should valorize. So I can present here like some methods that we are disposing on, which are the market methods, which are the optimization of the cropping systems and practices, the increase of the productivity of land races through the optimization of conditioning systems, the increase of the productivity of the land races by participatory breeding approach with farmers, and to identify and exploit the good performing land races as the traits of interest, so for biotic and abiotic stresses, and also for quality sometimes, because if they don't have sometimes the high productivity, they are often having the asset of having a high quality. And to strengthen and enforce individual farmers and farmer group of local community decision-making and innovation systems. And also, an idea could be also to establish a community seed bank and to create, and this is very important, a specific catalog for registration of land races with requirements of adequation within the intra-varietal genetic diversity. This is a very big challenge because the fact that a variety should be distinct, homogeneous, and stable. This is not something that you can require from land races. Still, we have to be very innovative to see how we can protect, how we can characterize, and also how we can have an inventory of our land races and make a reglementation about their uses. Of course, there is also non-market methods that are going into not to increase the value, but to increase the awareness. And here we have to promote the educational activities and to increase the public awareness of the level of the importance of the genetic diversity. I just want to say that within our institute, we have then more than 30 years of research on agrobiodiversity of faba bean within the unit of genetics, plant breeding, and biotechnology in IIV Hassan II. And I would like just to give you some examples that we were running across all these aspects. I was saying how to increase the value and also to increase the non-market methods and the educational and the awareness of the importance of the genetic diversity. So we have studies where we have the characterization of faba bean land races in Morocco and evaluation of their tolerance to drought stress and using molecular markers. We have as well within the projects of Biodiversity International, thematics that were addressed to the conservation and use of the crop, the crop genetic diversity to control pests and disease. And this is about valorization, because we are not just characterizing, but we are valorizing as well these resources and see how they could provide solutions actually to the challenges that are raised about the biotic stresses, where we have proved that actually the fact to use much more diversity is bringing the incidence of diseases much more, lower than the fact to use just one variety. And this is, of course, about the risk management, as you have much more risks in low input environments. We have, I will just skip this because I know that we don't have a lot of time. It's just to give you some ideas about the topics we were addressing to valorize the genetic diversity. Is the fact that if we are using mixtures, we can decrease the pest incidence and we can definitely also increase the yield potential. We have also projects where these are ARIMNet projects where we have exploited also the performance of land races to weed stress. And we have evidence that some land races are providing a great potential to weed, stress and tolerance to weed stress. And such genotypes, of course, are of interest for breeders and also for farmers in low input systems where weeds are a serious challenge. We have also studied the tolerance of juvenile drought stress in faba bean land races in Taunet, and using, of course, whether juvenile drought stress in controlled conditions, but also in the fields. And it has proven to have a large diversity among faba bean land races for the tolerance to drought stress. We have it also, as I said, for the field, in the field condition as well. So, and this is, of course, of a great interest to either use it directly or to implement it into a breeding programs. There is also other actions. I have given here just some actions. There are many others, but the other action is to increase the educational and awareness, of course, on the importance of the genetic diversity. And for this, we are having a very tight connection with the network of farmers all over Morocco to optimize the farming practices and to make field days with farmers and to see with them and seek with them how we can, in a participatory approach, see what are their needs and working together and that they see the importance of what they are doing, because we have to say it. Most of the farmers, they are not having or growing land races because of the benefit of the work. They are doing it because it's the only option they have, because they have a low input environment where they have traditional farming, and the land races are providing, this adaptation that is lowering the risk of the failure of the crop. But if they have more input and if they have the possibility to have or to crop improved varieties, they will do. So they have to be aware of what they are doing. The fact that it is of benefits, but also we have to valorize with them all the genetic resources they have to keep them doing actually and keeping this conservation that is an in situ conservation of the land races. And this is a very big challenge. It's much more easier to take the resources and put them in the gene bank, but it's much more difficult to keep a community or to keep areas where we have an in situ conservation. And this, through the CBD actions, you can see that very few countries are succeeding in that, because we still have to be innovative, how to manage and how to implement such strategies. Yeah, but we are also, we are doing our best to increase this awareness, but of course it has to be done with all the stakeholders. Finally, I just want to finish. I hope that I haven't been so long during my intervention. I just want to stress that legumes are really crucial as a service crops for sustainable agriculture, that the genetic diversity is a key element for the management of biotic and abiotic stresses that are more acute due to climate changes, that policy should support, of course, actions in favor of the valorization of land races, and that we have to create specific process and framework for the registration and protection laws for the use of these land races, because you can see that the benefits for breeding companies are there because they have royalties, they can protect their varieties, but the communities of farmers who are there for centuries and through generations to provide these land races that have evolved and that are really a depository for great genes that are important for resistances, for tolerances, for adaptation. Everybody can use them, but they don't, the benefits are not going to these farmers. So we have to find a framework where these communities should also take benefits from the uses, whether directly or indirectly, of the genetic resources that they are conserving. And we have to have also, strengthen the specific research strategies that are focusing on the valorization of the genetic resources that should be promoted and further supported. I know that we are going too much into what is research and development. The research that is directly applied, but when it comes to the genetic resources, this is a long-term investment. And I think we are aware today that natural resources are the main option to save us from all the challenges that we are facing today, and that it should be a long-term investment. And with this, I would like to thank, all the, the research funding institutions and bodies. I know that there are others, but I haven't named all here. I want to thank them, especially also, Prima, who Age 2020, giving us also the opportunities to have projects working on this very important thematic. I would like to thank also the farmers community of the northern area of Morocco for all their collaboration. The work couldn't be done, and all the work cannot be done without them, and also for all their commitments and all what they are doing for the word actually in conserving, in being this natural laboratory of in situ conservation for many crops, actually not just legumes. And I would like to thank all the students that were involved and the technical assistant and the scientific team. And I would like also to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to participate with you today. I would have loved to be with you, but I hope that some of the main issues and conclusions and also our experience was shared today. And finally, I thank you for your attention.
Many thanks for all this useful information of a well-organized structure on the Landraces seed sector in Morocco. Thank you very much.
Now we will listen to Raúl Huberto Blas Sevillano and his presentation from the Peru University and his presentation for the genetic diversity management of Peruvian maize landraces as a strategy for sustainable food security.
Thank you very much. Many thanks for this invitation to share with you our activities in genetic diversity. I want to say something about genetic diversity management of Peruvian maize landraces as a strategy for sustainable food security in the Andes, actually. This is my presentation, a little bit on introduction, origin and domestication, maize classification, diversity of Peruvian maize, distribution and richness, conservation, in situ strategies, and some conclusions. Maize is a staple crop around the world. Of course, in Peru, maize is a global food staple with great economic and cultural importance. Mostly around the world, the maize is growing for animal feed and industry, but in the Andes, especially in the Americas, we use maize for human consumption. In Peru, especially, we are growing for traditional consumption. In Peru, about more than 500,000 hectares is cultivated. Half of them is for animal feed and industry, and 50% of them is for human consumption, especially in traditional dishes, that in traditional way. Of course, we are growing this is Peru. In Peru, we have different altitudes and different regions, mainly Costa is in the part of the sea, in the Pacific Ocean, and then we have Sierra, is the highlands, where we are growing maize until close to 4,000 meters above sea level. Then rainforest, we call selva. In this area, we can grow maize. So we have different types, different landraces adapted in different regions of Peru. This is a picture about different varieties, landraces growing, the Costa, Sierra, and Selva. That. Different uses, we have traditional, this is a landrace coming from highland, Cusco, Blanco Gigante, especially used for boiled, we call choclo, sancochado. Also, we have landraces to eat fried, we call cancha. There are varieties for that. Also, you know, around the world, popping maize. Beverage as a chicha morada that is without alcohol, or chicha de jora fermented maize. So we know already about origin and domestication. I don't want to say about that, but some data. Maize is recognized, mostly recognized that was domesticated in Mexico around 9,000 years ago from Teosinte, and a wild type of maize. It seems that was dispersed from Mexico or North America to South America by at least 7,000 years ago. A partial domesticated one what was brought to South America. Then in South America, it was domesticated completely and back again to North America, especially to Central America, already domesticated. So there is a different moment in location about their domestication. So this theory is not accepted for everybody. It's from domesticated from this Teosinte to this maize. It seems a little bit hard, but also there is another theory that maize coming is from another ancestry. About maize classification, this start in 1898 by Sturtevant in USA, where it was classified in 6 main groups, usually only using type of grains, like popcorns, flint corns, dent corns, or sweet corn, or flour corns. Then again, in USA, Anderson and Cutler added others characteristics and also genes that a group of maize have to share, which was used as a rice of maize. Maize is classified as a rice from that time. So with the project, which was supported by USA, it was collected maize around all the Americas. So after that collection, in the Americas there are around 300 races, which was published from Mexico in 1952 with 32 races, then in Colombia in 1975, Peru in 1961 with 52 races, which was identified in that moment. So Peru, it was in that moment with high variability in races. This was published according the theory of races, which was published for Anderson and Cutler until Paraguay in 1998. In Peru, this classification was done for Alexander Grossman, Wilfredo Salguana, and Ricardo Sevilla. In this classification, it was used morphological descriptors, for example, cob, tassel, and plant. Different uses for each group of maize, growing area distribution, also cytogenetics especially chromosome number and morphology. Presence or absence, for example, of knobs of the chromosome, of the knobs in the chromosome. Of course, we have some evolutionary process after domestication of different groups of races. For example, Confite morocho is a type of popping maize. Maybe it's the more ancient one. From that, we have other races like morocho or morocho carchabambino. So in that moment, it was nasally classified Peruvian maize in races coming from costa, sierra, and selva. That means coast, highland, and tropical rainforest. For each one, it was classified different races. For example, primitive races in sierra, it was identified as a confite morocho, confite puntiagudo, confite puneño, or culi, and for rainforest, enano. Then anciently derivated races from costa was mochero, alazampa, pagalaga, droga, rabo de zorro, chaparrero, etc. So we have in total identified 52 originally, then we added 2 more races in the 1982. This is some example of the representation of different potteries in our ancient culture like Mochica. We have clearly representation of cobs of the maize, different types of maize. Also in archaeological samples, we found ears very well conserved. That is a beautiful sample for the science to study, because in our coast we don't have a rainy season. That's why it was conserved in the sand of the coast of Peru. Here, another ceramic. I want to highlight in this diapositive is that this ceramic, which is conserved in the museum of the University of Cusco, maybe it's about 2,000 or 1,100 years ago, but that sample, we can compare them with maize we are growing today. This is chulpe, for example. We can find this type of maize. Also, this is another pottery showing maize with a long ear. The cob is the biggest one in Peru. We have now growing in the Amazonia. That is called piricinco. Maybe this is piricinco conserved in this Mochica ceramic vessels, or another one, but we have similar one. So this is racial classification of maize in Peru according to the region. Of course, some of them there are a large distribution. Another one may be very specific distribution. So we can show about a specific adaptation of some of maize, but also uses if it was developed or associated for different dishes, for example, for different communities. In this case, maize diversity Peru, we have collected around 4,500 accession, which is conserved at my university, Universidad Nacional Agraria La Molina, in maize program. So we analyzed 40% of them, about 1,800 samples or accession we genotyped and 1,700 we phenotyped coming from all of Peru, including Costa, Sierra, and Selva, which was phenotyped in each region according the origin of the accessions, using a morphological descriptor of maize, which was already published in 1991. Also genotyping using SNPs. For that, we used DART technology. The sample was isolated from leaves, which was dried and then pulled. After DNA isolation, we sent to DART technology as a service to generate SNPs. According morphological data, we grouped all accession. We look at here, the blue one belongs to maize coming from highlands. The red one is coming from the coast, and the green one is coming from rainforest. There is a separation, grouping sample according mostly their region, but there is also mixing between them. Here we can say look at this also grouping according the region. The red one is coming from coast, green one from highlands, and blue from selva, tropical rainforest. Here we can compare with the morphological and genotyping data, grouping. There are concordance with both them, grouping according to their region, their origin. With the SNPs, we have actually better data because we can also clearly differentiate races like Pericinco coming from tropical area, but mix it or identify it with different other races. Here, for example, Pericinco grouping with Cubano Amarillo. So we need to identify accession representative belonging to race, a specific race. So we need to clean a little bit, reorganize our collection. There are mixed accession with different races. That is showing our SNP analysis. Distribution of the landraces we have from the coast here is presenting races from Costa, something that are only located in a specific area, like, for example, Oruca, south of Peru, Tacna, maybe north of Chile, which one is tolerant to salty soils. That is an important source of the genes for plant breeding. Also, in highlands, we have many different races. Highland is the more diversity in terms of variability. In races coming from tropical area, rainforest, we have here that distribution. We can find in the north of coast of Peru, because coast of Peru in the north is similar in terms of climate with rainforest. That's why we have distribution also, some of them in coast of Peru. But we don't have in the coast of in the southern part of the coast of Peru, because the coast of southern part of the Peru is at night cold. That way we don't have maize from tropical area in the southern coast of Peru. The richness of distribution of Peruvian maize can show here. The red one, the square with red one, have more of the diversity, more number of the races, which is in the south of Peru and between Cusco, Apurímac. Then another one here in the central part of Peru, close to central part of Peru, belonging to 3 departments, Ayacucho, Huancavelica, Junín, and in the part of north of Peru, we have also Ancash, then others region. This area should be used to implement in situ conservation. We need to establish in different regions, including coast, highlands, and tropical rainforest, to establish conservation in situ of the maize in Peru. So, for in situ conservation, the unit of conservation should be rice. So first, it should be classified as diversity before conservation. That is racial conservation. Inside racial conservation, we have many varieties. So that one should be also classified. In Peru, we have conservation ex situ at the University of La Molina, sit at cold chamber, and in situ conservation as a crop by farmers. That is initially. We need the classification unit well established, because that will be monitoring. Monitoring the diversity should be done with reliable indicators. For example, defined rice and inside rice different varieties. For example, when we are going to the farmers, traditional farmers, we found maize like this, conserving after harvesting in this form. So we collected these samples with the farmers. Then we have to identify a specific rice. Then, after classification, we have to grow with farmers doing a racial composite. Racial composite means we have to collect all samples, different parts. We are growing that type of maize. Then we put together, we pull that all samples of, for example, chulpi rice. Then we are growing in order to mix all accession like this. 2 rows of males, which is coming from the same mixed samples of males, and others should be for females from samples. So we have for each accession females, we put 4 rows for females, 2 rows for mixed
Professor,
females. We conserve each accession.
Sorry to interrupt, but we are running out of time. So if you can please move a little quicker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I am finishing. So we harvest all the females, then we select the best plants. We're harvesting half-sheep families in order to have better new mixed races. In this case, in situ conservation, the racial composite is a unit of in situ conservation. A racial composite is formed from all the samples collected from a race in a region. They are first mixed and then recombinate for several cycles to have a heterogeneous population with maximum genetic variance. While a racial composite is recombining, seed is selected and produced for farmers. So we are thinking improving maize using and conserving the genetic diversity of maize with the farmers. Many thanks for your time. I'm sorry for using more time.
That's okay, don't worry. Thank you for the very interesting presentation.
Many thanks to you.
Also, with your presentation, you are helping us to make a link between this session and the following one that has to do with archaeological and history issues. But before that, do you have any questions for Dr. Gaudí and Dr. Sevillano? Please. Do you have any questions in the Slido?
No. We completed this
Yes.
session. We completed this session. All the speakers presented quite an interesting presentation. We derived many useful information about the Landraces status in several countries all over the world. So if there is any question among the speakers? Okay, I want to address a question to Vania Azevedo. Vania? Okay.
Yes.
Do you listen? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
We notice in your presentation about a very good cooperation with farmers and traditional communities. So I have to ask if you apply any educational or training program on these farmers in order to manage all this exceptional material, breeding material, improving their practices.
Yes, so SIP has different programs and scientists working in different areas. So the Gene Bank collaborates with the in situ team. We have a scientist working here in SIP with us for more than 20 years, who is a specialist in situ conservation, who promotes capacity building and trainings and interaction with NGOs and Farmers Association. So we have a few examples with different associations where we can do two different kinds of things. There is events that we organize with the associations. We provide support to them. Actually, the events are organized by them with our technical support, where we capacitate the farmers. So on specific trainings on different things like managing the crop, sowing, spacing, harvesting, conservation of the material, storing. and also technical assistances. So sometimes the farmer is already trained, but is facing a specific issue. So during these events, the farmers come and they try to understand what is happening, if this is a disease, what is happening with this material, how you can help me with this, it might be lack of water, in fact. Different questions or doubts, what we call technical assistance. So these are the two levels that we collaborate with the farmers to help them promote better cultivation of their potatoes in the area. And as I said, it's always together with, there are different NGOs and farmers association, and we do collaborate with them. It's not that we go there to do it, but we provide the technical support and the scientific knowledge whenever they require, whenever they need our support. We do it together with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Horst. Okay, this session is ended, and we go on with the next session.
Thank you all very much.